Let's go to Anthony from Brooklyn. What's up, Anthony?
How you doing, Mr. Kane, Miss Reese? How are you guys?
Hi.
Good.
This is more of a question. I heard you mention that black folks were kicked out of the Republican Party. Could you expound on that for me?
Oh, wow. I've talked about this a lot, but I'll try and give you a brief history. So let me try and make it as plain as possible. Anthony, thank you for your question. Black folks, of course, began as Republicans. After the Civil War, the majority of black folks were Republicans. Sadly, black women couldn't vote. You have folks like Frederick Douglass and Bishop Henry McNeil Turner and Hiram Revels and Blanche Bruce. And they were supporting the Republican Party because that was the party that slavery it was ended under the Republican Party. Now, of
Hmm.
course, Abraham Lincoln was hesitant when it came to slavery. He was forced into glory, as they say, but that's a whole other story. But as time went on, towards the end of Reconstruction, which is around it ends, I believe, in 1877 with the Compromise of 1877, the Republican Party was already turning their backs on black people.
Hmm.
They were stabbing black folks in the back, including a guy who I do like, President. I like to some degree, President Grant. They were tired of bringing having federal troops down in the South to protect black folks from white violence. I know we often hear about Tulsa, we often hear about Rosewood, but there was countless black towns and communities that are being burnt to the ground via white violence. I encourage you to look up the 1875 plan in Mississippi, where they basically kicked out the black elected officials and took it over. But let's fast forward. Black folks still hold on to the GOP. They're standing by the GOP. Then we get to the 1950s, brother, and in the 1950s, you see the Republican Party. Let's talk about region. You see Southerners transitioning
Hmm.
to the Republican Party. Southerners. So it isn't always about the D or the R. It's
Yeah.
about the region. And then when you have Lyndon B. Johnson and JFK to some degree putting in these civil rights laws, they basically lose. They lose the South completely, the Democratic Party. And I'm going to give you a quote from Senator Edward Brooke. He was the first black senator elected in 1967. The first two were appointed. This is a black Republican, Anthony. He says, I'm sorry, he says this in 1964 because he sees this split happening. Senator
Hmm.
Edward Brooks says, you can't say the Negro left the Republican Party. The Negro feels he was evicted from the Republican Party,
Hmm.
right? How are they evicted? Look at the 1964 RNC convention when Jackie Robinson compares it to Hitler's Germany, to Hitler's Germany, saying that folks were being called the N-word, black folks were not being allowed to talk. There's a great guy named George W. Lee who was a longtime black Republican, and he wasn't allowed to speak. And these proclamations that this is now the white man's party.
Mm.
And Dr. King talks about this. He says this in an episode of Face the Nation, where he says that he is scared to see the Republican Party turning into the white man's party. The power players, Strom Thurmond, Barry Goldwater, Richard Nixon, they made a decision. This will be the party of the Southern strategy. What's the last of the Southern strategy? It was an execution to play on white fears, white racist fears, to get that Southern vote. That
Hmm.
was the Southern strategy, and they didn't want the black vote anymore. So black folks were kicked out locally, and they were kicked out in their city council, their school board. The Republican Party took over, and the mark of that is where we are today. That's where
Hmm.
we are today. So that quote from a black Republican is so crucial. The Negro was evicted from the Republican Party. We were
Mm.
kicked out. We were kicked out. We were unwanted. It's the reason why Dr. King supports Lyndon B. Johnson. It's the reason why Jackie Robinson, the iconic Jackie Robinson, a famous black Republican, he says that Richard Nixon, will be quote unquote death to the blacks.
Mm.
And he was right because Richard Nixon puts in this war on drugs. So
Hmm.
the white power players in the party made the decision to kick out black people. That's why you can't be mad at us when we don't support y'all, because we were kicked out in the 1950s and the 1960s. Then I can go on and on when you have it continues with Ronald Reagan and him opening up his 1980 presidential a general election campaign in Neshoba County, Mississippi, where civil rights workers were killed. I can go to George Bush, where the second Bush, he files a voting rights lawsuit under his DOJ, I should say, against a black man in Mississippi, black
Hmm.
man named Ike Brown, had a voting rights lawsuit again. It was the first time the Voting Rights Act was used to sue a black man. Then, of course, his father decided to veto the 1990 Civil Rights Act. So it's been a long history of racism, of letting us know you are not welcomed here.
Right.
Now, I will say this, Anthony, if this were 1868, I'd be a Republican. I don't have any loyalty.
Yeah.
Party is going to protect the most vulnerable. Then, lastly, Anthony, I'll go to you. When President Barack Obama gets in office,
Mm.
baby, that was it. That black Barack Hussein Obama and his wife, Michelle LaVaughn Robinson, that
Mm.
was it. And they upped the ante even more for their Southern strategy tactics. So again, don't blame us for not supporting this party. Y'all kicked us out. You kicked our grandparents out, our great grandparents out 60 years ago.
Mm.
You've continued a legacy of explicit racism. Are Democrats perfect? Hell no.
No, definitely not.
God no.
Mm-mm.
I will critique Democrats left and right.
Mm-hmm.
But the Democratic Party where it is today, it's much better than it was when I was a kid. There
Right.
was no Jamal Bowman in the
Mm.
Democratic Party when I was a kid. There was no Ayanna Presley when I was a kid. There was no Malcolm Kenyatta when I was a kid. Who's your man? Oh my gosh, your friend Reese in Cali, Michael Tubbs.
Michael Tubbs.
There was no
Mm-hmm.
Michael Tubbs when I was a kid, right? So I believe that if we take over the Democratic Party the way that the MAGA folks and the Tea Party folks
Yep.
took over the GOP, we can have significant progress. But is it perfect? No. But do they want us in their party, the GOP?
Yeah.
No. They
Oh, wow.
haven't since the 1950s and 1960s. Anything you want to add to that, Reese? You know, I've gave that speech a few times. You've heard me give
No,
this.
I mean, like the bottom line is, there's so much that happens that is not happenstance. Like it's just not a coincidence. Oh, we all magically decided at the same time to switch affiliations. It's the same way we didn't all magically decide to have negative views about this person. It's disinformation,
Right.
or we didn't all magically decide. Not all, but you know what I'm saying. Like there's a way that Black people have been systemically targeted throughout history to create these shifts. And sometimes it shifts to our detriment because they're trying to keep us, like, for instance, away from the ballot box, keep us away from things that empower us. And then sometimes it shifts because, look, we got to survive. I mean, Tim Scott said we survived slavery, child. So, I
Right.
mean, we got to survive the damn Republican Party in 2023 and before then. And so, you know, I think people just really try to portray it as a zombie move as opposed to a self-preservation move. And at the end of the day, I ain't hear nothing in debate one, debate two, or from any of these Republicans in their home states where they are governors or senators or whatever the situation may be that indicates that they will not be a threat to my Black life, my Black husband's life, and my Black daughter's life. And so for that reason, they're disqualified from anything that I would ever be considering, point blank, period.